Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, entitled Creation, Chapter 8, text number 5. Sadhayitva Ajatasattroho Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitabair Hratam Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Asataha Ragyaha Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshata Ayushaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha
Sadhayitva
Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam
Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha
Satayushaha Sadhayitva Jatasatro Swamrajyam Kitavairhratam Ghatayitva Sato Ragyaha Kachasparsha Satayushaha
Sadhayitva Satro Swayam Rajyam Kitavairhratam Gata Vasto Rajanaha Kacha Sparsha Shata Yosha
Synonym Sadhayitva, having executed. Ajatasatroho, of one who has no enemy. Swamrajyam, own kingdom. Kitabaihi, by the clever Duryodhana and party. Hratam, usurped. Ghatayitva, having killed. Asataha, the unscrupulous. Ragyaha, of the queens. Kacha, bunch of hair. Sparsha, roughly handled. Kshata, decreased. Ayusaha, by the duration of life. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: The clever Duryodhana and his party cunningly usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthira, who had no enemy. By the grace of the Lord, the recovery was executed, and the unscrupulous kings who joined with Duryodhana were killed by him. Others who died, their duration of life having decreased for their rough handling of the hair of Queen Draupadi. Translation with repetition: The clever Duryodhana and his party cunningly usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthira, who had no enemy. By the grace of the Lord, the recovery was executed, and the unscrupulous kings who joined with Duryodhana were killed by him. Others also died, their duration of life having decreased for their rough handling of the hair of Queen Draupadi. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the glorious days or before the advent of the age of Kali, the Brahmanas, the cows, the women, the children, and the old men were properly given protection. The protection of the Brahmanas maintains the institution of Varna and Ashrama, the most scientific culture of attainment of spiritual life. The protection of cows maintains the most miraculous form of food, that is milk, for maintaining the finer tissues of the brain, for understanding the higher aims of life. The protection of women maintains the chastity of society, by which we can get a good generation for peace, tranquility, and progress of life. The protection of children gives the human form of life its best chance to prepare the way of liberty from material bondage. Such protection of children begins from the very day of begetting a child by the purificatory process of Garbhadhana Samskara, the beginning of pure life. The protection of the old men gives them a chance to prepare themselves for better life after death. This complete outlook is based on factors leading to successful humanity as against the civilization of polished cats and dogs. The killing of the above-mentioned innocent creatures is totally forbidden because even by insulting them, one loses one's duration of life. In the age of Kali, they are not properly protected, and therefore the duration of life of the present generation has shortened considerably. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that when the women become unchaste for want of proper protection, there are unwanted children called Varna Sankara. To insult a chaste woman means to bring about disaster in the duration of life. Dussasana, a brother of Duryodhana, insulted Draupadi, an ideal chaste lady, and therefore the miscreants died untimely. These are some of the stringent laws of the Lord mentioned above. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminati Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Imagine there is a plate of Rajbhog which is prepared wonderfully by our devotees who's cooking. And this is just pictorial representation. There is juice, there are two varieties of sabji, there is nice halwa, chapati, maybe puri, paratha or whatever, and some pakoda, fruits. Who would not be interested in having it? In fact, the eagerness to have prasadam can be seen in people now that we have prasadam available, right? We all want to have. But imagine a person goes, Ananya, okay, not Ananya, anybody goes, and then takes this plate of prasadam, instead of chewing it, just gulps it. Chapati, gone. Pakoda, gone. Very tough. When gulping a pill, if you have to swallow it, it's not easy. But because the eagerness is so much, I'm just gulping it. How many of you think it's the good way of eating prasadam? It's not, right? It is meant to be chewed. It is meant to be relished. It is meant to be, taken slowly, so that each of those taste, that is there in each of these food items in this prasadam is experienced by the person who is eating it. Sometimes what happens in our life is we hear Bhagavad Gita, we hear Bhagavatam, we read Bhagavad Gita, we hear Bhagavatam, but the process of hearing stops there abruptly because we don't do sufficient meditation on that. Interestingly, scriptures, when they say that the process of hearing is very powerful, it is not limited just to the time that we are spending in Bhagavatam class in hearing. The process of Shravanam is always followed by Mananam and Nididhyashanam. Mananam is to chew that food. It is not meant to be, sun liya, Bhagavatam class ho gaya. It becomes a blind ritual. It becomes a mechanical process. And when it becomes a mechanical process, even though we hear Bhagavatam day after day, class after class, if not every day, at least on weekly once, it doesn't change our heart. Heart change doesn't happen. The impact that it is supposed to create, we miss out on that because we are not touching it. We are not sufficiently ruminating. We are not sufficiently chewing it. We are not relishing it. The purport of Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are so ecstatic. Unfortunately, if we don't pay attention, it becomes another verse on another day which we read and we forgot. But to prevent that to happen, it is important that we sufficiently meditate, we sufficiently chew, we sufficiently discuss, we sufficiently relish, we get absorbed in that. That absorption makes the transformation in the heart. So this wonderful verse that we have today, very interesting, these verses and how Prabhupada brings some of these important points. What I want is, don't listen to the whole class, but at least take those points and think about it. Think for yourself. Ask yourself, each one of us, we need to ask, what am I doing in my life? Is my life any different from what the scriptures are telling? Is there a way that I can transform and bring that positive transformation? What happens if that transformation comes? Actually, if we go with that kind of an attitude in every single Bhagavatam class, then there is relish, there is a positive inspiration and a drive inside, and that positive the positive drive or the transformation, that positive inspiration brings the transformation. The purport today that Prabhupada has given, I want, there's one phrase which stood out for me. Very, very powerful phrase, very nice. And I want all of you to think and meditate. And Prabhupada says, it's a very beautiful phrase. Okay, let me go to the phrase first, then I'll come to the verse. And the phrase is, the complete outlook. It's a very interesting phrase Prabhupada has used. Imagine this butterfly, which is also colorful, and it is enamored by the glitter and the glamour of this material world. If you see the picture, it's actually a pathway where people are walking busy in the night with a lot of passion, desire and all. And a small butterfly looks at that and develops a desire. Maybe I should live life like this. That outlook of this living entity drives his action. What outlook I am having inside me, that drives. And where does this outlook come from? This outlook comes from where we are seeing what kind of an upbringing, what kind of an association I am having. So the phrase, the complete outlook, can change the perspective of life totally. Very powerful. Whatever outlook we have, based on that our actions follow. You have certain intent, certain drive, certain passion, certain belief. And those beliefs, those drives, those desires, those intention, they drive our action. But if we don't have a complete understanding, it is, imagine you are looking the world with a pair of glasses which is covered or which is tinted with some color. Depending upon the color which is tinted with, you see the world in that way. Unless that tinted thing is removed, that film is removed, our vision is colored. And very interestingly, this word, just one word, complete outlook, can change the course of our life completely. And we will see how beautifully Prabhupada brings, what is this complete outlook that he is talking about. Let's pay attention to the verse first. Sadhayitva jata satroho swam rajyam kitaver hritam ghatayitva satoragyaha kachasparshak shatayushaha. Sanskrit is such a powerful language and such beautiful expression in Bhagavatam. I don't know, any hard-hearted soul also will get touched by this, the use of words in Bhagavatam especially. That's what the other day when Subhyakta Prabhu was mentioning in the class, it's so poetic and it can bring that transformation. Provided we are ready to listen, provided we are ready to allow that process to happen inside. Sadhayitva jata satroho. So one of the synonyms, one of the names of Yudhishthir Maharaj is Ajata Satro, who doesn't have any enemy. Sadhayitva jata satroho swam rajyam kitaver hritam. His own kingdom was usurped by the party of Duryodhana cunningly. Kitaver. Prabhupada has used the word, Bhagavatam is using the word kitaver. Kitaver is coming from the same word which is used in the second verse of Bhagavatam. Dharma projita kaitava. Dharma projita kaitava atra paramo nirmad saranam satam. Kaitava is that cheating religion. Kaitava is cunning, cheating. Swamrajyam kitavair hritam. Sadhayitva jata satroha swamrajyam kitavair hritam. So by cunningly, by some trick, by cheating, Duryodhana's party usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthir, who didn't have any enemy. Ajata satroho, that is a qualification of a pure devotee. Sadhayitva jata satroho swamrajyam kitaver hritam ghatayitva satoragyaha kachasparshak shatayusha. There are two things which this verse is talking. One was kitaver hritam, Duryodhana and party unscrupulously, cunningly usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthir Maharaj, and Ragyaha Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha. Ragyaha is referring to Queen Draupadi. Kachasparsha, Kacha is hair, Sparsha. When she was, her hair was roughly handled, Kachasparsha Kshatayushaha. Immediately their lifespan reduced. So two things happened. One was usurping of the kingdom by Duryodhana and party. Then immediately, by the mercy of the Lord, all these people were killed. Sadhayitva. The Lord executed this. Sadhayitva jata satroho swamrajyam kitaver hritam ghatayitva satoragyaha kachasparshak shatayushaha. And the second thing which is mentioned is the moment they touched the hair of a chaste queen like Draupadi, kshatayushaha. Kshata is diminished, decreased. Ayusaha, the duration of life was decreased. So Prabhupada is mentioning the translation, the clever Duryodhana and his party cunningly usurped the kingdom of Yudhishthira, who had no enemy. By the grace of the Lord, the recovery was executed, and the unscrupulous kings who joined with Duryodhana were killed by him. Others also died, their duration of life having decreased for their rough handling of the hair of Queen Draupadi. And as I mentioned, this is a beautiful purport. This kind of purports should be read, meditated, and thought through properly. Excellent purport. If you see the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada is mentioning about one thing called in the glorious days or before the advent of the age of Kali. That means the age of Kali is not a glorious days. The glorious days were there in the past, the days of yore. In the glorious days or before the advent of the age of Kali, the Brahmanas, the cows, the women, the children, and the old men were properly given protection. There are 5 things which are mentioned. The Brahmanas, the cows, the women, the children, and the old men were properly given protection. Unfortunately, we can't rewind. There is no button that we can go back to the glorious days of time. The Kali, as it progresses, the values in human life will fast degrade. You can't do anything about it. It is the unfortunate time where we are all part of, where we are helplessly exposed and subjected to the degradation of human values. If there are only 2 individuals, in the age of Kali there will be a difference of opinion and there will be quarrel. And to become Krishna conscious in the age of Kali is extremely difficult. Bhagavatam, in the beginning, when the sages are posing this question to Sutta Goswami, mentions the people's effect in Kali Yuga. What will happen? The symptoms of people who are born in the age of Kali. They says, Prayena alpa ayusa sabhya kalau asmin yuge janaha manda sumanda matayoho manda bhagyahi upadrata. Prayena alpa ayusa sabhya. The duration of life is very small. Prayena alpa ayusa sabhya kalau asmin yuge janaha manda. They are extremely lazy. Very lazy people. All of us. Manda sumanda matayo. Mati sumanda. You tell once, you tell twice, you tell thrice, multiple times. Still it doesn't penetrate. Manda sumanda matayoho manda bhagya. Unfortunate. When there is an opportunity to make advancement in spiritual life, people don't take it. Manda bhagya and upadrata, always disturbed. So we are born in this age of Kali, which is not the glorious days. And in this age, the human values will fast degrade. And one of the symptoms or one of the characteristic of people who are living in the age of Kali is they will disrespect Brahmanas. They will kill cows. They will become womanizer. They will mistreat the children and the old men. But very little do they know the subtle impacts of doing all these things. And as Prabhupada is pointing that this powerful phrase, the complete outlook, and he says that this complete outlook is based on factors leading to successful humanity as against the civilization of polished cats and dogs. One way of living life is living life as polished cats and dogs. What does it mean, polished cats and dogs? Polished cats and dogs is nothing but a person who's busy in aggrandizing his sense gratification. Somewhere or other, my goal of life is to enjoy, and the definition of enjoyment is by indulging my senses in sense gratification. A human life who misses this outlook goes heavily, like probably I found a very beautiful example or a beautiful picture. It's a AI generated image which shows how the small ant, looking at this big skyscrapers, is preparing itself with its tiny energy, with its full potential, working hard, passionately, and in ignorance to become happy, successful, in a frail attempt where this is never going to be successful. He has no idea, but he is busy maintaining himself in that so-called status, trying to acquire money, trying to have something. In this process, it's such a laborious process to get a little glimpse of happiness in life. So very interestingly, when somebody is engaging in that kind of an activity, as we saw in the last verse, Bhuteshu kalasya gatim darshayanna pratikriyam. Kalasya gatim. Kala is moving forward. Bhuteshu kalasya gatim. The living entities, when he's trying to act in this way, unknowingly he's getting implicated by the reactions of action. Bhuteshu kalasya gatim darshayanna pratikriyam. And there is no remedial measure for this. why does this happen and how is it happening and what is it that needs to change? What is it that is making all this difference? Very interestingly, we need to, I'm going to give this example. Does anybody recognize this picture? Is it here in Massachusetts? Which school? Huh? I searched in the Google, I think it is in Shrewsbury, some school, I don't remember what. It's not Oak School. It said Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, but I don't know. The picture is cut. Maybe I'll put the full picture. Very modern? Okay. Anyway, everybody became awake and alert. Very good. Thank you. The school is maintained by whom? Huh? By the government. So the same government who's using its energy to maintain a school where education can be imparted also maintains a prison house. Okay. Same energy of the Lord is the same energy of the government is used to maintain a prison house where people are punished. Very interestingly, when somebody has not taken to the path of spirituality, we may condemn them. But it is not about condemning them. It is about understanding why somebody is behaving like that. And to understand that, one has to understand that everything in this material world is happening or is going on by the energy of the Lord. By one energy of the Lord, this earth, this water, this material world is manifesting, whereas there is another energy of the Lord which is acting where the Supreme Lord is present in His own abode. That's the internal energy of the Lord. But this is still, for us, we can classify that, but it is all energy of the Lord. So the energy of the Lord, by the energy of the Lord, there is a material world which is created, like this prison house, where people like us who are the marginal energy, the Tatastha Sakti, forgetting our constitutional position, Prabhupada uses a beautiful word in his lectures and in his purports, called unconstitutional desire. Because we have a desire, unconstitutional desire to enjoy this material world. We want to think independent of Krishna. We want to do things independent of Krishna, and we are here in this material world and we are struggling, we are suffering. That is what is the nature of the Tatastha Sakti or the marginal energy, where a person doesn't have a complete understanding of who he is. What is his purpose of life? And he is driven by that kind of an outlook. He does not mind doing any sinful activities, anything that comes. I have to enjoy at any cost, independent of Krishna. Whereas when somebody awakens his original constitutional position, understands who he really is a spirit soul, part and parcel of the Krishna, then he acts in a different way. But unfortunately, it does not happen on its own. Why? Because Krishna says, Daivihi esha gunamai mama maya duratyaya. We can't break the shackle or the influence or the covering of the external energy by our own efforts. It requires mameva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. Mameva. Only if one surrenders to Krishna, and that surrendering process helps one overcome this maya. Prabhupada gives a very beautiful example. Of course, I was talking about these three kinds of energy. That, imagine a child who's crying, looking at his mother, that I want that moon. I want that moon at any cost. Sometimes, the children, they cry so incessantly, fervently, and so vehemently. They want it at any cost, persistently. Now, what can a mother do? An intelligent mother maybe, can show a mirror, and in that mirror, the moon is there. So the child can play with the moon. Actually, the moon is not there. It is just the reflection of the moon. Similarly, in this material world, the material world is created orchestrated and designed in such a way, there is no happiness. There is no question of happiness. It's a reflection. It is giving a glimmer. It's giving an experience that there is happiness in this material world. And somehow, people like us who are here, like the children, are enamored by that experience of the presence of the moon in the form of happiness. The real happiness lies when somebody engages in devotional service. The real Joy, the real pleasure lies when somebody engages in devotional service to the Lord. There are countless verses. There is one verse which comes in Bhagavatam which says, Anartha upasamam sakshad bhakti yogam adhokshaje. Anartha upasamam sakshad bhakti yogam adhokshaje lokasya ajananto vidvams chakre satvata samhita. Anartha upasamam, this suffering, this miseries that we are going through is actually, it is superfluous to us. We don't deserve, we don't need to go through all this. Anartha upasamam sakshat bhakti yogam adhokshaje. Adhokshaje, that Lord Krishna who is beyond our material senses, sakshat bhakti yogam, when we engage in proper devotional service to him, then we become free from all these material miseries. That is they say sometimes the Ramvan remedy, right? One remedy for all the problems when we engage in devotional service. Sakshat bhakti yogam adhokshaje. Lokasya, but majority of the people don't know. They want happiness, they want to become successful, they have an outlook of life which drives them to do different things, but they're not aware. But by engaging in devotional service, they can become completely free. There is a purport of Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavatam in connection to the discussion which is happening between the bull and the cow in the 16th chapter, where it is mentioned the earthly deity in the form of a cow thus replied to the personality of religious principles in the form of a bull, O Dharma, whatever you have inquired from me shall be known to you. I shall try to repay to all those questions. I shall try to reply to all those questions. Once you two were maintained by your 4 legs, and you increased happiness all over the universe by the mercy of the Lord. This verse actually talks about the importance of following the regulative principles, the importance of following the religious principles. The whimsical way of life, where we don't follow any of these religious principles, only leads to misery. But when we follow the religious principles very strictly, those 4 pillars, anybody knows what are those 4 pillars of religion? Madhava? Okay. Yeah. Then what? 1 and you'll get away with that. Okay, Mukund? Yes. Anybody else wants to try? Akhilesh, what are the other 2? Huh? Okay. Compassion, kindness. Okay, that's the right one. So, looking for one thing which I'm not finding. Okay, interestingly, it has gone. So the translation Prabhupada is saying following these 4 regulative principles is very important. Or following these religious principles is very important, because when you are standing on those 4 regulative principles, you increase the happiness all over the universe by the mercy of the Lord. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions, happiness in the world depends proportionately on the maintenance of the religious principles, individually or collectively. The best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. Thus, one can be happy during the span of life and ultimately return to Godhead. So you see this, we are all looking for happiness. The person who has got a different faulty outlook, he's trying to become happy in this material world by engaging his senses in sense gratification. But the real happiness in this world is depending upon proportionately on the maintenance of the religious principles. individually or collectively. And the best part of valor is to maintain the principles despite all kinds of odds. Thus, one can be happy during the span of life and ultimately return to Godhead. And this is what the organization or the institution established by Prabhupada is offering us. An opportunity to engage in devotional service by maintaining the principles of religion despite all kinds of odds. How many people are here? Hardly, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 people. But Prabhupada says this attracts the swan kind of people, swan-like mentality of people. When they come together, they hear nice philosophy, they have the darshan of beautiful deities, they take prasadam, they engage in devotional service, and by that, they purify their polluted aims of life, and they return ultimately back to home, back to Godhead. So it is very important that in our life we follow these religious principles at any cost. That's what happiness in the world depends proportionately on the maintenance of the religious principles, individually or collectively. And this intelligence, it will arise only if we hear this repeatedly. When Prabhupada landed here, if we remember the song, this is a time when Prabhupada actually had boarded, and we are not reading the Jaladuta diary, but the song that Prabhupada wrote was Bodo Kripa Koile Krishna. Right? In that there is this line which comes, Bhagavater katha se tabe avatar, dhira hoya sune jadi kane bar bar. And then he goes to say about Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavatere katha se tava avatar. Actually, the message or the book Bhagavatam is available. It's an incarnation of the Lord. Bhagavatere katha se tava avatar, dhira hoya sune jadi kane bar bar. There is no hope. When Prabhupada came, the instrument, the real weapon that he was carrying, this hope, that belief that if people hear this, somehow or other if they hear, then they will become dhira. Dhira hoya sune jadi kane bar bar. If this message of Bhagavatam goes, then people will become little dhira, little sober, little undisturbed, and then their aim of life will change. Otherwise, these passionate people, when they come, very difficult to hold them, very busy. I see people come. Yesterday, there were two people who came. They were twins. They live here in Westboro, and they probably would, in my experience, I have not seen someone coming to the temple and going back so quickly. They came, as soon as they came, they ran away. They just came, and they are there. I mean, I saw them, I said, this is the way to the temple, and the very next moment, they are there. I said, you had darshan? Yes, I said, yeah, we had darshan. Okay. And then they were about to leave. Very interestingly, even though, they were twins, their life is so different. One is working in CVS in Rhode Island, and the other person is working in some other company here in Westboro. So this person commutes from here to Rhode Island. They look exactly same with little difference. And I told that your nose is this thing, little different. He is wearing specs, the other person is not wearing. With some very little this thing, I could make out that there is some difference. What I'm trying to say is, people's attention span is very low, and their response to situation is also very different. Everybody is different. And this is how the spread of humanity, where so many different kinds of human beings are there, and they're responding differently, and that's how when we see someone else, we develop a desire that maybe I should become like him, then I'll become happy. And they were about to run away, but somehow I told them that why don't you become why don't you take this magazine at least? Take this magazine. If you read this is all contemporary issues, very relevant. Maybe it'll help you to get a spiritual perspective. And they took. Otherwise, it is. There is no question of becoming dhira. Dhira is a very high, elevated state where somebody is in the mode of goodness, but this Kali Yuga is predominantly in passion and ignorance. So, but this philosophy can attract. This has got the power, and Prabhupada's belief in this song, he is putting that Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavatashu, the series of verses in that. Bhagavatara katha se tava avatar dhira hoya sune jadi kane bar bar. If it goes repeatedly, then even inside us, whatever those anarthas are there, they will go slowly. Elsewhere in another prayer, our Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he very aptly summarizes the situation, why we are struggling, and what is the solution, what is the way we can come out. So he says, Bhuliya tomare samsare asya, pe nana bidha vyatha. Bhuliya tomare samsare asya, pe nana bidha vyatha. So we've forgotten Krishna. Forgetting Krishna is our unconstitutional position. The sad part is, we don't even remember now. Bhuliya samsare asya, pe nana bidha vyatha. And we are suffering. Birth, death, old age, disease, problems, challenges, relationship issues, this thing, that thing, so many problems. Why? Because we've forgotten Krishna. The essence of it is Krishna is missing in our life. Bhuliya tomare samsare asya pe nana vidhabhyatha. And then he's saying, Tomara charane asya chiyami boliva dukhyara katha. Now somehow I have come to the shelter of you. Tomara charane asya chiyami boliva dukhyara katha. And I will explain how much of sufferings, how much of miseries I am going through. This realization happens only when somebody comes in touch with a pure devotee. A pure devotee of the Lord very mercifully engages us in the devotional service of the Lord. Otherwise it is impossible. Tomara charane asya chiyame boliva dukhyara katha. There is a verse in Bhagavatam, I don't have that right now, I was trying to look for that. There is a verse in Bhagavatam which says, when somebody comes in touch with a pure devotee, including an animal, gets engaged in devotional service. Including an animal. When we are all human beings with developed intelligence, we can use our intelligence, understand really this is good for me, this is what it is required. Even an animal, if he comes in touch with a pure devotee, he can get engaged in devotional service. So when a pure devotee comes, he forcibly wants to take us away from this clutches of material energy, this external energy. But we still are so stuck, we don't want to come out of it. But he somehow engages. And this process of engaging, Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje, purifies us. And we become liberated from the clutches of material energy. There are two verses of Kunti Maharani which I want to mention, which is given in Bhagavatam, where when Kunti Maharani in her prayers, when this same chapter, a little later it will come, wonderful verse, where she is praying to Krishna when Krishna was about to leave, and she in her mind is recollecting, why did Krishna descend? Why Krishna has to descend? And she herself is giving some reasons. We know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam smrijamiham. Whenever there is a decline of religious principles, I come to re-establish the principles of religion. And paritranaya sadhuna vinasaya cha duskritam. To protect the devotees and to annihilate the miscreants, he comes down. Then she also goes on to say some more reasons. But finally, in her conclusion, she says why Krishna comes down to this material world, the reason being, bhavesmin klishya mananam. Bhavesmin klishya mananam abidya kama karma bhi shravana smarana arhani karisyaniti kechana. Bhavesmin klishya mananam. Actually, this material world, bhava is to become. Become what? To become old, to become diseased, to become dead. This is what this material world is all about. But I may say that no, I'm growing, I'm becoming a working professional, I'm becoming a married man, I'm becoming a father, I'm becoming a mother. These are all the curtains of external energy of the Lord. But actually we are becoming diseased, we are becoming old, and we are becoming dead. Bhavesmin klishya mananan avidya kama karma bhi. Why we are stuck here? Because of ignorance. Because we are not able to understand, our constitutional position, who we are. That avidya is leading us to desire, kama, and because of that kama we are doing karma. And because of the karma there is reaction. Bhavesmin klishya mananan avidya kama karma bhi shravana smarana arhani karisyaniti kechana. The reason why Lord descends and performs these wonderful activities, so that we can hear. There is Ramayana, there is Mahabharata, there is all this wonderful description of beautiful pastimes of the Lord. That Shravana leads to Smarana and then Arhana. Shravana is to hear, Smarana is to remember, and Arhana is to worship. Shravana Smarana Arhani Karisyaniti Kechana. The Lord performs these wonderful pastimes, descends and does this so that people like us who are conditioned, forgetful of Krishna, who are suffering, gets interested in hearing that. That hearing leads to remembrance of the Lord. And as we know from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, Ante Narayana Smriti. Anta kalecha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram ye prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshaya. When we are able to remember the Lord at the time of death, that is the perfection of human life. So to give that facility to conditioned living entities who's completely forgetful, who doesn't have any taste, the Lord descends and this wonderful pastimes are enacted by that, so that we hear and we remember and we worship Him. Karishaniti Kechana. And then she goes on to say the next one, that beautiful verse where she sings, Shrinvanti Gayanti Grinanti Abhikshnasaha Smaranti Nandanti Tabehitam Jana Taiva Pashyanti Achirena Tavakam Bhava Pravaho Paramam Padambujam. Shrinvanti, hearing, Gayanti, Gayanti is to sing, Grinanti is to accept. Shrinvanti Gayanti Grinanti Abhikshnasa, continuously. That continuous hearing, continuous glorification, continuous acceptance leads to Smaranti and Nandanti. Even if somebody is not able to do that, even if he appreciates somebody else doing that, Nandanti. Generally appreciate, okay, these are good people, they are coming and they are doing some chanting, they are hearing, they are spending their time. Smaranti Nandanti Tabe Hitam Janan. That Nandanti also leads to purification. Taiva Pashyanti Achirena Tavakam Bhava Pravaho Paramam Padambujam. So that leads to the darshan of the lotus feet of the Lord, and that brings a close to this cycle of birth and death. Bhava Pravaho Paramam, Uparamam Padam Bhujam. Uparamam is to bring a cessation to the cycle of birth and death. This is the process which is available, and this process is made available to us by the help of a pure devotee. I want to conclude the time that we have together with one very interesting pastime of Srila Prabhupada. As we all know, Srila Prabhupada left his body in, which place? In Vrindavan. Which year? 77. Which month? So, November 1977, Prabhupada left his body. The beginning of 1977, Prabhupada had this desire that I will quit my body in Vrindavan. Imagine, there is a desire like that I want to quit my body in Vrindavan. Prabhupada could understand that, he's becoming old, his body is not supporting, and he decided that he would go and quit his body in Vrindavan. So, before going to Vrindavan, Prabhupada was actually in Rishikesh trying to recover his health. And recently there is one sannyasi of ISKCON who passed away. There is a small clip that he had shared, and I want to talk about that. His name is Bhakti Charu Swami. So he talks about the last days of Prabhupada. Something very striking he mentions, very powerful. He was personally present when Prabhupada was about to quit his body. And he mentions he was there even in Rishikesh when Prabhupada was recovering his health. So for a few days Prabhupada was there in Rishikesh, and then he decides to come to Vrindavan. And when he reaches Vrindavan, all devotees who were there, all his disciples were very, very ecstatic and happy to see that Prabhupada has come. But at the same time, they were very sad to see that Prabhupada's body was completely emaciated. Very, very thin, very anorexic. There is nothing, only bones. And Prabhupada had stopped eating. He was not eating anything because he was preparing to go for this final journey. Actually, the life of a Bhagavatam, like Srila Prabhupada, whatever we are reading in Bhagavatam, like, Parikshit Maharaj preparing for his death, or Bhisma Dev quitting his body, all those things what we see, what we read, Prabhupada has demonstrated it in his life. That is why when we chant that verse, Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, it says by regular attendance in classes in Bhagavatam and by rendering service to a pure devotee. There is a book Bhagavata and person Bhagavata. I don't know how many of you have read the book, The Transcendental Diary by Hari Sauri, but in the preface he mentions that by becoming a personal servant to Prabhupada, before even reading Srimad Bhagavatam, he has seen Prabhupada doing everything what is mentioned in Bhagavatam. And one of the things which is very painful, which each one of us has to go through, which is the final test, is the time of death. So Bhakticharu Maharaj, he mentions that when Prabhupada reached there, all the devotees were very ecstatic. They were very happy that Prabhupada has come, and they were there. So that time Prabhupada says, I have come here to quit my body, and they were saying, no, Prabhupada, you can't do this. We are still very young. We need your guidance. We want you to continue. And then hearing their plea, Prabhupada actually started taking some medicines, which was personally prepared by Bhakticharu Maharaj, by some Ayurveda doctor who used to come and give. And Prabhupada started taking some juice in Charanamrit, and his health started improving a little bit. And as soon as he got little strength, he said, I don't want to be in Vrindavan. I want to travel. And the biography which Satswarup Maharaj has written, our Leelamrita, in that there is a chapter which comes that is called, in the last volume, there is a chapter which comes that Krishna's great soldier. So Prabhupada's point was, I don't want to remain here, I want to die in the battlefield. So he traveled. He actually made it a point to travel even in those conditions. And then finally, of course, he wanted to go to the US, he could not, and then he went to UK and came back, and then he was there, he was wearing that specs. We've all seen those pictures. And then Prabhupada continued to give those purports to Bhagavatam till the last point, till the last breath of his life. His voice was so feeble. Now, if I am speaking here, the mic can produce the echo, but that his body was so weak. The instrument was at that point in time meant to touch Prabhupada's mouth so that they can record that. But still his consciousness was crystal clear. 10th canto, 14th chapter, the Brahma Vimohan Leela, the purports are some of the amazing purports of Srila Prabhupada. He demonstrates this, how one can quit his life by practicing Krishna consciousness throughout. And Prabhupada quit his body, he ended his material manifested Leela around in the evening time. And this news spreaded in Vrindavan. It went to all the Goswami temples. And the Goswamis of this 7 important temples, they sent a message to Bhakticharu Maharaj, not to Bhakticharu Maharaj, I mean to all the devotees in ISKCON, saying that you should not give samadhi to Prabhupada today. You should bring Prabhupada to all the deities, to all the 7 principal temples, the 7 Goswami temples, and then after that you can give samadhi. This actually, there's some small clip which was shared where this Bhakticharu Maharaj, this is the last lecture that he gave, where he's talking about this. I've not heard, but just small clip where he says, what those Goswamis intended to mean is not that Prabhupada should be brought to have darshan of the deities. They wanted other people, and including Krishna, to have darshan of Prabhupada. This is very clear, he says. It was very clear in the message. They wanted even Krishna to see Prabhupada, what he has done. There is a very nice statement by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He says we should work in such a way that Krishna becomes interested in seeing us. Not that we are interested in seeing Krishna. Krishna becomes interested in knowing who is this devotee, how nicely he's engaged in devotional service. That should be the goal of our life. And as Prabhupada mentions in the purport of, in his towards his last, those final days, one of the instructions is that our love for him is shown by how nicely we are cooperating with each other. What does that mean? That means that when we get rid of this envy and jealousy towards others, when we come nicely together to serve Srila Prabhupada, to serve Krishna, then that feeling of togetherness, coming together and working cooperatively, helps us to advance in our spiritual life. Because in Vaikuntha there is no question of being in anxiety or looking at someone and feeling bad or feeling envious. That is not there. That envy, that anger, it is not there. That is what Prabhupada, that is what, if we do, will please Prabhupada. There is a senior devotee of, when the Prabhupada disciple, when he was asked a question, that you have been practicing devotional life for last 30, 40 years. What is that one biggest challenge that you have faced? Or what is it that you have felt which is the biggest obstacle? You know what he answered? His answer was that Krishna very mercifully, kindly has arranged in so many different wonderful ways to have so many devotees in our life. But I could not develop love for each one. This is something which we should remember. This philosophy is there. We are extremely fortunate that, we have gotten an opportunity to engage in the service of Radha Damodar by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. There are devotees who are coming together. If we can work cooperatively, if we can develop that feeling of love for each one, then we can actually create a Vaikuntha atmosphere. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments. No questions, we'll stop here. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Srila Prabhupada